No, de alcanzar our fashion show
All right.
2023. So
I'm
how
doing
are you,
doing
Precious?
good. How's everybody doing?
I think everybody is good. I think we are all in a rush. This Sunday we have our model casting. So at 1 p.m. at Taller Puertorriqueño. So I hope to see all those beautiful uh, bodies and attitudes to have a great time on the 19th. That is our fashion show. And we have a
Say that
surprise,
again,
Precious.
Nasheli.
Yeah, we have a surprise.
What's the surprise?
Yeah.
What don't I know? Oh, that
That you're
surprise.
going
Yes,
to
yes,
be
yes.
here
I'm
with
sorry.
us. So Precious is going to visit us here in Philly the day of the fashion show. She's going to be joining us.
Thank you
Our
so much.
special
I'm
guest.
so excited to see everything that everybody's making, particularly in relationship to the conversations we've been having, so I think it's going to be really interesting and a lot of fun.
Great. So do you want to start with our
All right.
theme of the day?
So today we are going to talk about the color white. So we started out with denim, a fabric, and I guess you can talk about jeans also, so a fabric and a style. Then we went to the beret, an accessory. And today we're going to talk about how a color has been used in resistance. So do you want to go ahead and get started?
Yes. So I am working here with
I am
some
too, so I'm trying to work on them without looking like I'm...
Oh yeah.
Okay. You know what I'm
here?
Hold on one second.
Maybe
I'm
we
going to grab some different earphones because these are not working. One sec. I'm going to see if I can make this work. That's why I had to have you repeat something just now. It all worked fine the last two times, but today it's being contrary. So give me 1 second to try this. Got to set up an alt.
So
I'm hoping this is going to work. 1 second. We'll catch up. Don't worry. All right, let's see how this is. Say something. Oh, we're in business. Okay.
Yes, thank you. So we are talking today about white as a resistance, as a part of our series. It's very important that we at Taller see fashion as part of our culture and how we are using these as a sign of resistance in our communities. People of all the diverse backgrounds. So what do you say about the white as a color? Like I think you need to be a psychology on that and on the perceptions of when we see
absolutely, and that's basically where we're going to start today. So if you want to go ahead and put up the first image, I can go ahead and talk a little bit about that. How's that? Okay. Yeah, interesting images. So like Nasheli said, to understand the use of the color white as a, color of resistance, we have to understand a little bit about the psychology of the color white. So I think everybody pretty much knows that we're all affected by color. We can put on a certain thing on any given day, and depending on the color that we're wearing, it can make us feel a certain way. So color can and does affect our perceptions. Our environments, our cultural upbringing, that can influence what a particular color represents for us. Now, according to psychology today, warm colors, yellows and orange and pink and red, they can motivate us and energize us. However, if they're too intense, they can also be irritating and make us nervous. Cool colors, on the other hand, such as green, blue, violet, they can have a calming effect on us. Gray, surprisingly, which is commonly used for like formal occasions or professional settings, it can actually be more depressing than black. So if you wear bright colors, let's say on a winter day that's very gray and cold outside, then they can become what they refer to as our emotional vitamins, and they can make us feel better.
Oh yeah, and why fashion designers
Oh,
use so
well, we're
much
getting
black?
ready to talk about that too, okay? So I went to another site
Okay.
called Color Psychology, and it says that black
Okay.
is associated with power, with elegance, formality, death, evil, and mystery. So you can see,
That
there you go.
describes the
There
fashion
you go. I was
industry.
just about to say, so you can see why it's used in the fashion industry. It is also considered a mysterious color associated with fear of the unknown. So that's like the example they gave was the black holes in the universe that we have no idea, what's beyond. Again, a mysterious color associated with fear. It also has a negative connotation, the word blacklist or the word black humor or black death, the disease. So all of those things, come from our perceptions of the color black. But most importantly, I think it says it denotes strength and authority. Okay, so it can also be considered a very prestigious color.
Yes.
But most of us in the West, when we think of black, we think of grief, wearing it to funerals and things like that.
Yes. Yeah. In Puerto Rico, they say that you dress in black so the
Okay,
spirit
and that makes
doesn't see
perfect
you.
sense. What does black do? It absorbs all the light. So that makes absolute sense. Now,
Yes.
on the opposite spectrum, the color that we're talking about tonight, white, well, I think most of us who are people of color understand a lot about the psychology of white, okay? White is associated with light and goodness and innocence and purity and virginity, all of these things. It's considered to be the color of perfection. It signifies safety and purity and cleanliness, and it usually has a positive connotation, and it can also represent a successful beginning. It depicts faith and purity. So the images that Nasheli just held up, they are of the woman known as Queen Victoria of England. On the right, here we go again. I did it backwards again. On the left, she's wearing a white wedding dress, and that is a tradition that she is credited with starting. So white wedding dresses were not the fashion until Queen Victoria wore a white wedding dress. Now on the right, this is also her, and this is her wearing something called widow's weeds, just like a weed you pull up, in your flower bed. It's a black dress that was worn when women were mourning their husbands. And she wore this black, not this black dress, but a black dress for 40 years to mourn the death of her husband. Yeah, that's a whole lot of, yeah. Let me not, yeah. Okay, so the next image. All right. Now, in Western culture, like I just said, we generally, traditionally wear black to funerals when we're mourning someone. However, in Asian culture, many Asian cultures, I won't say all, white is the color of mourning. So these images are top right, a Japanese funeral, top left, a Chinese funeral, lower right, a Vietnamese funeral procession, and lower left, a Cambodian funeral procession. I tried to do them all correct from the way you're holding it, Nasheli. So I tried to fix it. So to reiterate what I said before, culture and environment influences how we understand and perceive color.
Also, last week you did connotation with the Black Panther, and in Black Panther they use white in the
they did indeed. They did indeed. All right, so this image, we're talking about the color white and how it's been utilized in resistance movements, but the idea of white being associated associated with goodness and innocence and purity and cleanliness is one of the reasons that it is used by various world religions for certain rituals. In the Catholic Church, white symbolizes purity, joy, light, and glory. In Islam, white is considered the purest of colors. And in Afro-diasporic belief systems, including Santeria and Candomblé and Voodoo, white is worn for venerating certain deities. So the image on the right is of a Catholic mass for the birthday of the priesthood. Yes, that one. The center image is of the Islamic pilgrimage of Hajj, and that's the Kaaba in the center. And the image on the right is of a candomblé ceremony in Brazil. Now, candomblé, hold that image for a second, Nasheli. Candomblé is an Afro-Brazilian religion of resistance. It is based on the Yoruba tradition in West Africa, and it made its way to Brazil with the transatlantic slave trade. In order to worship their African deities, under the dominating presence of Catholicism in Brazil, the enslaved concealed them in Catholic saints. So when they were visually worshiping a Catholic saint, they were spiritually worshiping a candomblé orisha or deity. Candomblé is an example of cultural preservation and resistance to the imposed religions of enslavement.
And that happened all over the Caribbean. And that is how
exactly. And Santeria, like I said, both Santeria and Voodoo and Candomblé all come from the West African Yoruba tradition. Now, isn't this interesting? Here's an example of a white religious garment getting co-opted into a symbol of hate by a group that was resistant, yes, resistant to racial integration and anything that did not uphold white supremacy. The image on the right is of a Catholic procession during a week in Spain called Semana Santa, because some people may be completing a personal penitence. They cover their heads and their faces with hoods to keep their devotion personal and to not be publicly identified. The Santa Semana hoods and robes come in a variety of colors and materials, from plain cotton to luscious velvets. Now, the white cotton version of the Santa Semana robes appears to have been the inspiration for the uniform of the Ku Klux Klan. The center image, go to center, Nasheli, is from the catalog of official robes and banners of the Knights of the Ku Klux Klan. It was published in 1925. And the image on the left is a group image of the KKK from between 1920 and 21. So you can see very clearly where the inspiration for their robe and hood came from.
And so they see this as a...
I mean,
oh my God.
Yeah, I'm not exactly sure what they see it as, but it's clear that that's where the inspiration came from. Anyway, let's move on. Okay, these images are of the East Indian independence leader Mahatma Gandhi. This is one of the most powerful stories of the impact of white fashion as a tool of resistance. During India's quest for independence from British rule and domination, Gandhi asked Indians to spin their own yarn, weave, and wear their own homespun cloth known as khadi. This was in an effort to halt the importation of British cloth and lessen India's dependence on this foreign cloth. It was also a way of rejecting the attire of the colonizer and adopt the clothing of the poor. One of Britain's main exports to India during imperialism was cheap cotton textiles. You all remember the Industrial Revolution. You know, that was where all of the cotton from the American South was shipped, you know, picked by enslaved people, because Britain had all those factories and they just needed more and more and more cotton. Around 77% of all the cotton produced in the American South went to England, went to Britain.
Just a perfect moment to remind everybody watching that Puerto Rico
there
is
you
the
go.
oldest colony
Very good.
in the world.
So what happened when Britain, was shipping all of this cheap cotton to India and making Indian people pay for cotton? What it did was it crippled the artisan textile production in the Indian villages. It put this entire population of Indians out of work and thrust them into poverty. Now, the Dutch tried the same thing in Indonesia with batik, but it didn't work. But I'm going to be honest, that's another story for another day, because we could do another, I don't know, hour on that alone. The thing about imperialism is that it's all about making someone dependent on you. The cloth, the use of cloth in India's independence struggle was so important that the spinning wheel, as you can see in the center, was incorporated into India's earlier flag, which you can see there. And below is the current flag of India, where the spinning wheel has been replaced by the Ashoka chakra, or the wheel of Dharma. And Dharma loosely translates, as best as I could understand, as righteousness or a moral code for living. So that just lets you know how important this white cloth was to India's independence struggle. All right. Now, these images are of Iranian women protesting Iran's mandatory hijab law. And hijab is the headscarf that Muslim women wear.
This was very recent.
This is more, yes, much more recent. Yes, from every Muslim person I've ever known, it is a personal decision that each woman makes. Not something that should be imposed upon you. That's what I have learned. So in September of 2022, last year, I think we all remember when Masha Amini, that's her Iranian name, she's of Kurdish descent. Her name is Gina Amini. She died in a hospital in Tehran, Iran, after being beaten by the guidance patrol or the morality police. Supposedly, she was not properly wearing her hijab. Her death resulted in major protests against mandatory wearing of hijab. The Kurdish political chant, "Woman, Life, Freedom," became the rallying call. And the protests resulted in many people being arrested, beaten, and killed. And these protests continue till today. But Iranian women have protested mandatory dress codes before, including the 1979 during the Iranian Revolution. Now, in 2017, thank you very much, during the Iranian protest, a woman named Vida Movahid, I'm going to pronounce these as best I can, in the image on the right, tied her hijab, to a stick and waved it in the air. And while she was like standing on some sort of utility box on what is known as Revolution Street in Tehran, she became known as the Girl of Revolution Street. Now, the image on the left is of an Iranian journalist and activist, Masih Alinejad. Alinejad was the founder of the White Wednesdays campaign, and she's waving a hijab in New York City during the 2017 Women's March. The movement encourages Iranian women to wear something white on Wednesdays as a form of protest against the compulsory hijab. And the center image is of Alinejad's friend, Sepida Jodare, who is a poet and who marched in Washington, D.C. and said, "I am marching today because I wanted to talk about forced hijab in Iran. I wanted to support the movement, White Wednesday. This is a march for every woman, everywhere." And in the next,
So,
and these images are of Iranian women participating in White Wednesday movement. They wear their white on Wednesdays, and then they post their photos on social media. And as you can see, it's an intergenerational movement.
And coming back a little more to this side of the world, I think we
Yes,
saw it in the
exactly. So,
okay.
okay.
This image.
Yeah, these images are of early suffrage protests. The suffrage movement began in Britain in the 1860s for women to get the right to vote. By the turn of the century, they still didn't have the right to vote. So in 1903, Emmeline
White
Pankhurst,
woman.
oh, yeah, oh, you don't worry, I got that covered. It's coming. In 1903, Emmeline Pankhurst established the Women's Social Political Union, a group composed of primarily white women. They were labeled suffragettes, using ETTS as like a diminutive and insult by the British press. The image on the right is of a 1911 march through central London. White fabric was affordable, making it accessible to many women of different backgrounds. So that's why, they chose white. The color association with purity, allowed these women to present themselves in a dignified way and a respectable way. On the left is a 1925 suffrage march in New York City. The suffrage movement solidified the association of the color white with women's equality. And although Negro women did form their own suffrage groups, they did not get the right to vote in 1919 when white women were granted the right with the passage of the 19th Amendment. Black women were not guaranteed the right to vote until 1965. The Voting Rights Act was passed. That was 46 years later. And according to an author named Elaine Weiss, she is the author of The Woman's Hour, The Great Fight to Win the Vote. She said that when the movement was faced with racist opposition, they betrayed Black women when they were fighting for the right to vote. The white suffragists argued, there are more white women who will be voting than Black women, so don't worry. White supremacy is not going to be endangered. That's a quote. Not that I'm not making that up. So
and then they sent us back to the kitchen.
Yeah.
They sent us back to the kitchen.
You got it. Here at right is the I keep writing 2000 is the 1913 suffrage march in Washington, D.C. So a few years later. And at right is a 1977 reenactment of the 1913 march on its 57th anniversary of the passage of the 19th Amendment. The women were demonstrating in this image for the passage of the Equal Rights Amendment. And as you can see, white has taken on, a life of its own as the color of struggle for women's rights.
Do you think also because you said that they used this color because it was the cheapest, so they were thinking from an economic perspective, but they were not
exactly
from a racial perspective.
They wanted women across the spectrum. I'm not saying the spectrum of including Black women or other people, but women across the spectrum of white women, whether you're poor, rich, or whatever, to be able to wear something that unifies everyone within the movement. Now, this is an image of the NAACP silent march. There was an estimated 10,000 Negroes, and I'm using the terminology of the time period, in New York City in 1917. This was to protest, believe it or not, the police treatment of Blacks during riots in East St. Louis, and to protest lynching and racial discrimination. Nothing new happening today with regard to that, huh? They marched down.
It's when people say that we need to celebrate the social justice movement. I keep saying that we have
never
stop doing
never.
that. So
Yeah.
we still work
So they
in the
marched down
works.
Fifth Avenue in this parade without saying a word. No singing, no chanting, no nothing. It was silent. Now, the Equal Justice Initiative describes the East St. Louis massacre as follows. On July 3rd, 1917, continuing violence raged in East St. Louis, Illinois, as white mobs attacked black residents and destroyed their homes and other property. The primary outbreak of violence began July 2nd, 1917, when white residents of East St. Louis and other nearby communities ambushed African American workers as they left factories during a shift change. The National Guard was called in to suppress the violence, but they were ordered not to shoot white rioters. And some of the troops reportedly joined the mobs targeting the black community. From July 2nd through July 5th, 1917, at least 39, and some estimate as many as 200 African Americans were shot, hanged, beaten to death, or burned alive after being forced into buildings. The riots caused more than $400,000 in property damage in that time frame, and prompted 6,000 African Americans, more than half of East St. Louis's African American population, to flee the city.
And it's still the poorest
Absolutely.
area in St. Louis.
Absolutely.
And is where they push all the violence, all the drugs. They send it there. That happened here in Philadelphia with Kensington area. That is the area where we
Absolutely.
serve.
So these are additional images of the march. These are all at Yale University. They purchased this collection. So after the drummers and the NAACP organizers, which included James Weldon Johnson, who wrote the Negro National Anthem, and W.E. Du Bois, who I talked about in my first talk, children dressed in white led the march. So you can see the little people there. Then it was followed by the women, also in white, and then the men followed in the rear. A flyer that was distributed at the march asking the question, why do we march? Here are 3 of the 7 replies. We march because we deem it a crime to be silent in the face of such barbaric acts. We march because we want our children to live in a better land and enjoy fairer conditions than have fallen to our lot. And we march in memory of our butchered dead, the massacre of honest toilers who were removing the reproach of laziness and thriftlessness hurled at the entire race. They died to prove our worthiness to live. We live in spite of death shadowing us and ours, and we prosper in the face of the most unwarranted and illegal oppression. Now, this image is of the Black Trans Lives Matter March in 2020, and it was inspired by the Silent March of 1917. The march was a protest against police brutality towards Black transgender people, following the killings of Black trans women Dominique Remy Fells, who was 27 years old in Philadelphia, and Rhea Milton, 25, in Cincinnati, Ohio. And from the poster, you can see the words, Silent March, Wear White. So this is what it was inspired by, the 1917 Silent March. And the image at left is a ground, at right, is a ground level view of the march. The other one, yep. So you can see how it looked from the ground. And now, Nasheli, let's put up that next image. It is the most amazing image. This image is an aerial view of the march with the Brooklyn Museum at the center. And when I saw this image, I thought to myself, it's probably a good thing that it was a silent march, because it was in the middle of the COVID epidemic. So everybody was wearing a mask, and being silent was probably a very good thing at this particular moment in time. But isn't that an extraordinary image of people wearing white to protest police brutality against trans women.
Because trans
There you
women
go.
are just women.
And here we are, women in politics. That's your favorite?
This is
Okay,
my
okay.
favorite. This is my favorite one.
Women in politics have long used white as a message for equal rights. Here, white has been used by 4 women in politics representing the first, okay? So I'm gonna flip them as best I can. Upper left is Shirley Chisholm. She was the first Black woman to be elected to the United States Congress in 1968. She served 7 terms in the House of Representatives advocating for women and minorities. She was also the first woman and African American to seek the nomination for President of the United States from one of the 2 major political parties in 1972. And her motto was unbought and unbossed. Now on the lower left, yep, that's it, we have Geraldine Ferraro. She was the first woman to be nominated for vice president by a major political party in the United States. She served as Walter Mondale's running mate in 1984 in the presidential election. They lost the election to Ronald Reagan and his running mate, George H.W. Bush. Now let's go to lower left. Lower left, I think we know who that is. That is Hillary Clinton. She was the first woman to win a presidential nomination by a major U.S. political party in 2016. She did win the popular vote, but she lost the election. And then, yep, upper right, this is Kamala Harris. She is the current Vice President of the United States. She is the first female vice president, as well as the first African American and first Asian American vice president. She is the highest ranking female official in U.S. history. Each woman chose to wear white to celebrate their achievements as firsts.
And I think this one is very recognizable because we talk a lot about this image from 2019 when women decided to take a stand and to do a message to
exactly.
Trump.
So here we have an image of the Congressional Democratic women wearing white at the 2019 State of the Union address by Donald Trump. And they did this as a show of solidarity among women. This image includes Speaker of the House of Representatives Nancy Pelosi, sort of in front and the center, and several other more senior members of Congress, but also Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez can be spotted at center back. And then here are the 4 congressional women, congresswomen known as the Squad. They are, I knew you would like the Squad. The Squad dressed in white for the same State of the Union address. They were accused by Donald Trump as not being American and told to go back and fix the totally broken and crime-infested places from which they came. I don't really think he used, that's supposed to be a quote, but I don't think his English is that good. But anyway, huh? So they are on the upper right, Ilhan Omar of Minnesota. She is the first Somali American member of Congress. She came to the U.S. as a refugee and became an American citizen at the age of 17. Upper right, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez of New York. She is the youngest woman ever elected to Congress. Lower right, and she there you go. Lower right, yes. Lower right. The other right. That right. Sorry. Okay, this is Rashida Tlaib of Michigan. She is the first Palestinian American to serve in Congress, and she and Omar are the first two Muslim women ever elected to Congress. And then lower left, this is Ayanna Pressley of Massachusetts. She is the first Black Congresswoman ever elected. She is the first Black Congresswoman to represent Massachusetts. Now, Ayanna Pressley chose to boycott the State of the Union address, saying this: on the eve of Senate Republicans covering up transgressions and spreading misinformation, I cannot in good conscience attend a sham State of the Union when I have seen firsthand the damage Donald J. Trump's rhetoric and policies have inflicted on those I love and those I represent. But in support of her colleagues, shortly before the address began, Pressley shared two pictures of herself. In one, she wore a white coat and carried a clutch made of kente cloth. In the second, she wore a purple t-shirt printed with the names of several Black women who fought for Black rights, including Ida B. Wells, Harriet Tubman, and Sojourner Truth. Pressley didn't only commemorate those who fought for the women's right to vote. It also paid tribute to Black leaders forgotten by the suffragettes. She tweeted, "The women of the 116th were asked to wear white tonight in tribute to the suffragettes. Tonight, I honor women like Alice Paul, who led the movement, and women like Ida B. Wells, who were excluded from it. Kente cloth and the color white, holding space for both womanists and feminists always." And Ocasio-Cortez tweeted, "I wore all white today to honor the women who paved the path before me and for all women yet to come. From the suffragettes to Shirley Chisholm, I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for the mothers of the movement."
Amen. I wanted to, when you put this one, when I saw this one, I was like, this is the perfect closing, because we just had
That's
Met Gala, and we have one of our amazing
So
Puerto
this
Ricans.
is the final image, and it is also of, excuse me, Ocasio-Cortez. She attended the Met Gala in 2021 wearing a white gown with the message, "Tax the Rich," for which she was criticized as being hypocritical and tone deaf. But she simply replied on her Instagram saying, "The medium is the message. I am proud to work with Aurora James, a sustainably focused Black woman immigrant designer who went from starting her dream, Brother Valleys, at a flea market in Brooklyn to winning several CFDA awards against all odds, and then worked together to kick open the doors of the Met. The time is now for childcare, healthcare, and climate action for all. Tax the rich." And then she went on to say, "And yes, before anybody starts wilding out, New York City officials are regularly invited to attend the Met due to our responsibilities in overseeing our city's cultural institutions that serve the public. I was one of several in attendance, and the dress is borrowed." So with that, I will say mic drop, and thank you all for listening.
Yes, that's it. And we can see how fashion is powerful in the message and in our communities. And we look forward to see you in El Fashion Show, May 19, at Taller Puertorriqueño, to support the work that we are doing there, to create and hold
And
spaces for
remember
our
the
community.
power of fashion and clothing and cloth. It is a powerful medium for communication.
Totally. And we are going to keep using it every day, all day.
Anybody have questions or comments or anything?
Edgardo Gonzalez saying, "Pusieron las de Lolita Lebron." No, that is for the pants and we are going to have a conversation about how women started using pants and how Lolita Lebron was arrested in Cuba just for using the pants. What else? Do you have any questions about the use of white as a resistance in any movement? Any questions?
And
Any
everybody's
comments?
saying, thank you. You're most welcome. It was my honor to be a part of this.
Remember that right now we have a giveaway for tickets. If you take a photo in using any of these three talks, the white, the denim, or
Beret.
what was the third one? The beret. Send us a photo with your look, and you can get free tickets for a fashion show. So please follow our page and support a fashion show. And come and know Precious in person on May 19th at Taller Puertorriqueño. Have
Good
a
night,
beautiful
everybody.
night. Let's keep doing the right things. Take care. Let's
Bye-bye.
keep in resistance. Bye-bye.